In 1994, Nicholas Barclay was 13 years old when he left home to play basketball in Texas and never came back. Police investigated for months. The family waited for years. The bedroom stayed untouched, the bed made, the jacket hanging in the same spot. 3 years went by without a single lead. In 1997, the phone rang. A boy had been found in Spain. He said he was Nicholas. The sister bought a ticket that same day and flew to get him. What she found on the other side of the Atlantic was a young man with dark hair, brown eyes, and a French accent. Nicholas was blonde, blue-eyed, American. But she brought him home anyway, and the family took him in, sat at the table with him, slept under the same roof, and called him Nicholas. To understand what happened in that house, you need to understand who the person from Spain actually was. His real name was Frédéric Bourdin, a 23-year-old Frenchman with an extensive history of fake identities. Interpol called him the Chameleon. He had already fooled authorities in several European countries, and this time he convinced Spanish authorities that he was a kidnapped American boy. In Texas, the act went to another level. The physical differences were too obvious to ignore, so Frédéric made up an explanation. He had been subjected to medical experiments that changed his eye color, and the torture had forced him to forget English. The family nodded along. What brought it all down was biology. Investigator Charlie Parker ignored the story and went straight to the photos. He compared the shape of the face, the structure of the ears. It wasn't the same person. When the FBI stepped in, Frédéric confessed and was deported. But the investigation left a question unanswered, and it's far worse than Bourdin's crime. How does an entire family accept, for months, an adult stranger in place of a child? Bourdin left, the family stayed, and Nicholas Barclay's body was never found. The Boogeyman of Westfield. In November 1971, the neighbors of the List family in Westfield, New Jersey, started to notice something was off. The lights in the mansion stayed on day and night. Organ music leaked through the walls non-stop. Nobody went in, nobody came out. A month went by before police forced their way inside. What the detectives found wasn't a chaotic scene. The house was silent and absurdly cold. The thermostat turned all the way down. In the ballroom, laid out on sleeping bags, were 5 bodies. The wife, the mother, and the 3 children of John List, all shot dead. There were no signs of a struggle. The bodies were preserved by the cold, as if someone had calculated that. On the kitchen table, a 5-page letter addressed to the church pastor. On the surface, John List was a disciplined accountant, a family man, a guaranteed presence in the church pew every Sunday. The letter revealed something else. He wrote that the family was in debt, that his wife was drinking, that the children were drifting away from God, and that he chose to send them all to heaven before they were lost. It wasn't a breakdown, it was an execution, carried out with the coldness of someone closing out a ledger. After signing the letter, he got in the car and left. Police searched the entire country, questioned acquaintances, locked down borders. Nothing. John List had vanished without a trace. In 1989, the show America's Most Wanted decided to revisit the case. There was a problem. Police didn't have a single recent photo of List. How do you identify someone who's aged 2 decades without leaving a record? They hired a forensic sculptor. The task was to mold in clay what that face would look like after 18 years. Heavier, with less hair, probably wearing glasses. The bust was broadcast on national television. That same night, in Richmond, Virginia, a woman was sitting on her couch watching the show When the bust appeared on screen, she froze. She recognized the face immediately. It wasn't a fugitive hiding in some alley. It was her neighbor, a friendly accountant named Robert Clark, who went to church every Sunday and had remarried. When police broke down the door, John List was wearing a suit and glasses, nearly identical to the sculpture. The new wife didn't know a thing. The Maternal Smile. In May of 1983, a car screeched to a halt at the entrance of an emergency room in Oregon. The woman behind the wheel was screaming for help. In the back seat, 3 children with gunshot wounds. Cheryl, age 7, didn't make it. Christy, age 8, was barely breathing. Danny, age 3, was in critical condition. The mother, Diane Downs, had a gunshot wound in her arm. Once the doctors stabilized her, she told police what had happened. A stranger stopped the car on an empty road and shot her children. In a panic, she tried to escape and drove to the hospital as fast as she could. The story paralyzed the country. The image of a family destroyed by a faceless shooter was terrifying, and Diane stepped into the role of survivor with ease. She gave interviews, described the shooter, demanded justice. She was convincing. The investigators, however, noticed a few things that didn't add up. The wound on her arm was too superficial to have been fired from outside the car. The time it took her to reach the hospital, reconstructed by detectives, was consistent with someone driving at the speed limit, not with a mother in a panic with dying children in the back seat. And then there was that moment during a live interview. When the reporter asked about Cheryl, the daughter who died, Diane smiled. It was quick, but the reporter noticed, and the police noticed. It wasn't the kind of thing someone does by accident in a moment like that. What tore her story apart wasn't any forensic evidence. It was Christy. The 8-year-old girl survived, but spent months immobile in a hospital bed, slowly regaining the ability to communicate. When prosecutors were finally able to ask the only question that mattered, Christy raised her hand and pointed at her mother. There was no mystery shooter. Diane had shot all 3 of her children on an empty road. The motive came out during the trial. The man she was having an affair with didn't want children in his life. Faced with that, Diane made a choice. She executed her own children and days later sat in front of cameras to give interviews. Convicted in 1984 of murder and attempted murder, she tried to escape years later and was recaptured. She's still in prison today.